Okay, so you are all welcome. I hope you can all see the slides. Sorry, I hope you can all hear me. So let's quickly continue with the classes. I think the class, so I think now it is clear. So as we said that we are going to start with the definition of cell. So what is a cell? A cell, we are going to start with the cell structure and function. So what is a cell? A cell is actually, or before, there are actually a lot of scientists that make great contribution in cell, because cell is the structural and the fundamental unit of life. And of course, any organism that you see in this world, it must possess a cell. And if there is no cell, it means that there is no life. And if there is a problem with a cell, it means that there will be a problem with the life. We develop a disease in our body if there is a problem with the cell. And of course, as we all know that we have organization of life which actually started from atom. And from atoms is then actually further ahead changed to what we call tissue by the combination of the cell. And of course, from the cell, we'll have what you call a tissue. And from the tissue, we have organs. And from the organs, we have system. And from the system, we have complete living organisms. And of course, we have nine systems. So now what we are seeing here is that there are scientists that make a great contribution in biology. So the first one is Robert Hooke, which actually make the discovery of a cell in the year 1665 using a microscope. And then also another scientist called Theodore Schwann also in the year 1838 discovered a plant cell. And then after that, another scientist, Matis Kleiden, in the year 1839 also discovered what we call an animal cell. So these are actually the first scientists that was able to come up with an idea of the cellular theory. These three scientists, Matis Kleiden, Theodor Schwann, and Robert Hooke, they are the first scientists that was able to come up with an idea of theory of cell. So the first one says actually all living organisms are made up of cells. So it means that every living organism in this world is made up of cell. And of course, the cells is the smallest working unit of living things. So if the cells are working perfectly, it means that the living organism is also working perfectly, or it's surviving perfectly. And there is any problem in the unit of cell, it means that there will be a problem with the entire organisms, or maybe the organs that possess that particular cell. So cells also come from free existing cells through cell division. So cells that we are seeing now is not actually come from those. It doesn't actually come from stone. It doesn't actually come from wood. No, but the cells actually came from the free existing cell. So if you see a cell like we human being, it means that we actually came from the human cell through a process of cellular division. So if you see one particular cell, it means that that cells came actually from the free existing cell. Already there is a cell. So the cells, the new cells are usually coming from the free existing cell through a process of cell division, whether mitosis or meiosis. So that is actually what you call a cellular theory. So these are the three basic cellular theory that you should not forget. Number one, all living organisms, every living organisms, they are made up of cell. So if someone asks you what is cell theory, so the first thing that will come into your mind that okay, every living organisms they have cell. And then second, the cells are the smallest working unit of all living organisms. So they are the smallest units of all living organisms. It means that anything below cell, that's to tell you that if there is anything below cell, so it means that it cannot subcell life. So the smallest working unit of all living organisms is a cell. And anything below cell, so it cannot subcell life. And that is the reason why virus, because virus it is below cell. Because virus is just a particle. It made up of some macromolecules. Like if you have 14 and carbohydrate with some lipid, then with just some simple or just with non-covalent process, they will just generate what we call the supramolecular complexes. And of course, supramolecular complexes are one of the examples of virus is one of the example of supramolecular complexes. So because virus it is below cell, that is why it cannot sustain life. So the second theory here is telling us that the cells are the smallest working unit of all living organisms. So anything below it, then it cannot sustain life. And of course, some other or every living organism is also coming from the free existing cell through a cellular division. You can't say that okay, this is a Wi-Fi that you can get a cell from Wi-Fi. It's not possible. You can't just get it from a pen. So it means that all living organisms are coming from the free existing cell through a process of cellular division. The ducts, the duct cells are coming from the free existing duct cells. The human cells are coming from the free existing human cells. So we should understand that. So these are the three basic cellular theory. So and then the next thing is actually the definition of cell. What is a cell? A cell is the smallest unit that is capable of performing life functions. So a cell is the smallest unit, and on its own, if you can take the cell itself, it can undergo all the activities of life, all the functions of life. The cell itself can undergo that. So a cell is the smallest unit that is capable of performing life activities. So it means that if you can isolate one cell, because in the cell there are so many compartments, there are so many fat in the cell that support the cells to actually undergo a complete life process, to undergo a complete life process. So if you have a cell, just a one cell, like for example, now currently, if you go to the in the developed countries, what they are doing, they just if they want to get meat, they don't slaughter animals, they don't kill animals. Rather, they'll just get a cell, get a suitable medium, and then provide all the necessary ingredients that will support the growth of the cell. And then they will now get one cell, then put it there. The cells will actually sustain life processes. Then it will be growing inside that medium. Then as the cells are growing and the cells are growing, then they will start joining themselves, them to form a tissue. Then from there, you just start harvesting your meat from there. Some countries are doing that. It's because with just one cells, if you can just get one cells and you provide a suitable environment, that cell can just proliferate. It will multiply, grow, and develop. Then from there, you get your meat and you just start counting it. Because with just a single cells, the cells itself, it is capable of actually sustaining all life processes. So cell on its own, it can survive. That is why even we have different class of cells. We have unicellular organisms and cellular organisms. So when we said unicellular, it means those organisms that have only one cell. And they also survive as any other living organisms because they undergo all the life processes such as nutrition, excretion, reproduction. They undergo all those life processes with just a single cell. So that is to tell you that cell is fundamental and the functional unit of life. And anything that is below that cell, then it cannot sustain life. But if you take the cell on its own, it is capable of performing all life functions. So that is a cell. A cell is the smallest and is capable of performing life functions. Or in the other way, you can define cell as the smallest unit of life, or is the structural and the functional unit of life. Any of this, if you give it, then you have a complete definition of cells. Okay, then the next thing is actually examples of cells. So what are the examples of cells? We have amoeba. Amoeba is an example of unicellular organisms, that is those organisms that have only one cells. And we have bacteria. Bacteria are prokaryotic. We have red blood cells, nerve cells, plant stem. All these are examples of cells. So these are typical examples of cells. And then we have two types of cells. We have two types of cell. We have prokaryotic cell and eukaryotic cell. So whenever you had the types of cells, because I know that actually during our secondary school when we asked What are the types of cells? People are used to say plant cell and animal cells. So plant cell and animal cells are just examples of cells. But here, the two types of cells we have it generally globally is prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. These are the two types of cells that we have. So when we say prokaryotic cells, it means that they are the cells. Prokaryotic cells are cells that do not have structures surrounded by membranes. They don't have structures surrounded by membrane. It means that in a simple way, it means that when we said prokaryotic cells, it means that are those cells that do not have membrane-bound organelles, meaning that they don't have nucleus and they don't have mitochondria, they don't have Golgi body, because all these organelles, they are the organelles that actually we call them membrane-bound organelles. So prokaryotic cells they do not have mitochondria and the membrane-bound organelles. They just only have some few internal structures, and these few internal structures they have something like ribosomes, nucleoids, because they don't have nucleus. So we should get that prokaryotic cell doesn't have nucleus. And of course, from the basic knowledge of our cells, we know that the nucleus is what holds the DNA of a cell. So, but prokaryotic cell doesn't have nucleus. Rather, they have what you call nucleoids. And of course, in the nucleoid is where they actually is in the nucleoid that the prokaryotic cell contain their DNA, and they are one cell organisms. So most of the prokaryotic cells they are one cell organisms. They have only one cell. And examples of them we have bacteria. Then the next one is eukaryotic cells. So eukaryotic cells contain organelles surrounded by membranes. So they have organelles that are surrounded by membranes. It means that they have membrane-bound organelles. That is a simple way of saying that. So they have membrane-bound organelles. It means that they have nucleus and the other membrane-bound organelles. So in eukaryotic cells, they have nucleus, they have mitochondria, they have lysosomes, all of them they have it. So that is why they are called eukaryotic, because they have complete membrane-bound organelles. Of course, and this is like plant and animals. So we usually find this kind of organisms under plant and animal, that is eukaryotic cells. So eukaryotic cells are cells that have both nucleus and membrane-bound organelles. So, but the nucleus itself is also a membrane-bound organelle. So it means that apart from that, there is a nucleus, they have nucleus and other membrane-bound organelles, and that is what you call eukaryotic cells. And examples of them we have plant cell and animal cell. So this is actually a typical animal cell, a typical animal. And of course, if you can see clearly in the typical animal cell, we have Golgi body, we have mitochondria, we have lysosomes, ribosomes, nucleus, endoplasmic reticulum, and the plasma membrane. And of course, this is a typical plant cells. The plant cells, they have other organelles that are absent in the plant. Like for example, here, there's a cell wall, and they have what you call chloroplasts. We have renal crystal, we have Rose crystal, and these are actually we have amyloplasts. All these are found in plants, which are not actually present in animal. So it's just for you actually to see clearly some basic differences between the plant. Like for example, this one look like spherical and this one look like rectangular. And of course, they have chloroplast here. The major function of chloroplast in plant is actually for photosynthesis. And of course, animal doesn't have chloroplast. That is why it doesn't undergo photosynthesis. So now we are going to look at the different cell types or different parts of the cell part, which is organelles of the cell. So we are going to look at them one after the other and their function. We also have surrounding the cells, we have also surrounding cells. So the surrounding cells is the cell membrane. So cell membrane is like a layer, it's a double layer that cover the cell. It's like the wall of a cell. So it means that there is a layer that cover the cell, and that layer that cover the cell, the layer that cover the cell is called cell membrane, and the cell membrane is a double layer. It's a double layer. So the outer membrane of a cell that controls movement in and out of the cell. So this cell membrane is what actually control the activity of what get in and get out of the cell. That is one of the major function of the cell membrane. It protects the cell from any external attack. So it's like a wall that cover the cell. It's like a wall that cover a cell. And anything that want to get into the cell, so the cell membrane is what control that substances. If this is a glucose and it want to get the cell, so a membrane is what actually allowing the glucose to get in or not to get in. So you should get that. Any material that want to get in or out of the cell is controlled by the cell by the cell membrane. It's made out of double layer, and of course we are going to actually talk on the membrane on itself because it is a topic on its own. But the most important thing that we should understand here is the cell membrane. The cell membrane is also called the plasma membrane. It's also called a plasma membrane of a cell. So there are so many substances that sometimes want to get into the cell and get out of the cell. So of course, there must be a criteria for the selection. That okay, this is something and it want to get into the cell. Will I allow it or I shouldn't allow it? So the cell membrane is what actually did that. So we are going to take a topic and discuss on that as we are going. And then the cell wall. There's a cell wall and it's mostly found in plant cells and bacteria. It also supports and protects cells. So it's in plants. This cell wall is very rigid, it's very, very rigid, and at the same time it's also control and protect, it supports and protects the cell. Of course, the rectangular nature of the plant cell is due to the presence of this cell wall. And it is very rigid, so it's not everything that can just get into the cell. It's not everything that can just get into the cell. And apart from the cell wall, then what? So we just talk about what actually are surrounding the cell. We have plasma membrane in the case of animal, and then in the case of plants, we have what we call the cell wall. But now, let's get into the cell and see what are there. So first, in the cell, there is a nucleus, so direct cell activities. So all the activities of the cells are directed by the nucleus. That okay, is there a need for energy in a cell? Then the nucleus will direct that, will instruct the cells that there is a need of energy. Then the mitochondria and some biomolecules will now start be utilized by the mitochondria, the cytoplasm, and start generating energy. Okay, and then at the same time, okay, in a cell that okay, there is a foreign organisms or there is any bacteria or any fungi that want to cause problem into the cell, then the nucleus will now direct the cells to generate some antibodies that will now take care and clear those kinds of pathogens or microorganisms that want to actually trying to disturb that want to actually disturb the cell, and that is the nucleus. And of course, the nucleus is separated from cytoplasm by nuclear membrane. So that is what we call a nuclear membrane. So a nuclear membrane is a membrane. A nuclear membrane is a membrane that cover the nucleus. Is a what? Is a the cell membrane. Sorry, the nuclear membrane is a membrane that cover the nucleus, and it's that membrane that separates the cytoplasm from the nucleus. But if there is no cell membrane, it means that the cytoplasm and the nucleus will all match together. So it's like a demarcation between the nucleus and the cytoplasm, and that is what you call nuclear membrane. And then the nucleus is what actually contains genetic material, which is DNA. So the DNA, which is deoxyribonucleic acids, it is a genetic material that is found in the DNA. And this nucleus, sorry, this DNA is has so many functions. You are intelligent because of this DNA, and you are brilliant because of this DNA. The color of your skin is because of this DNA. The way we react to situations is because of this DNA. The way our body fight infections is because of this DNA. The dog is dog because of the DNA. We human, we differ from the dogs. We differ from sheep. We differ from monkeys because of this DNA. So the DNA is the language of life. The way I'm talking is because of this DNA. The way I shout, the way I react to situation is because of this of my DNA. If we are intelligent, it's because of our DNA. And if we are not intelligent, the problem is also from our own DNA. So that is why this DNA is usually inherited from parent to their offspring. So that is why intelligence is also inherited factor. That is why sometimes and most of this intelligence is coming from the mother. The intelligence is usually coming from the mother, and it's because of three reasons. Number one, apart from the nucleus of a cell, apart from the nucleus of a cell, there are also other organelles in the body that also contain DNA. Mitochondria contain DNA. Chloroplasts in plant also contain DNA. And the mitochondrial DNA is usually inherited from the mother. So mitochondrial DNA from the mother is what the child or the offspring are usually inherited. We don't inherit the mitochondrial DNA from the mother. So it contributes to that. And then second, the other reason why the intelligence is also coming from the mother is because of the breastfeeding, lactation. There is a protein called prolactin. So that also contributes. And in addition, why we also inherit most of the intelligence, 80% of the intelligence is coming from the mother. The mother are having XS chromosome, and of course the father, which is the man, usually have XY. So if you draw X, 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 and then you draw XY, it means that if you look at the Y itself, you see that the X is like, sorry, the Y is just like a Y. Sorry, the Y is just like an X. It's just that some part of the X that was missed. That is why it changed to Y. Of course, just remove some component of the X, you'll see that it will give you Y. So it means that some genes are missing there. Some genes are missing there. But the women are having the complete genes, and we usually inherit that genes from the mother. And that is why intelligence, 80% of the intelligence is coming from the mother. And you all know this because you can see someone maybe with like with like four wives. So you can see that some child from this particular woman or from this particular mother, maybe 90% of them are intelligent. And of course, you consider some child also from another woman. Most of 90% of their children they are dull, and it's because of their mother are dull. It's because their mother are dull, and of course she has those dull genes in her DNA, and that is why their child are also like that. And of course, if your mother are intelligent, even if your father is a professor, although the professorship, if you are professor, doesn't mean that you are intelligent, because intelligence, professorship is usually obtained through hard working, and of course with some level of intelligence. But when you see someone intelligence, you know that yes, he is really intelligent. So even if with whatever level of intelligence, tells you that it doesn't tell you that that particular person will born or will give birth to a child that are intelligent, because it's coming from the mother. So that's why you have to be very careful if you want to marry. Try as much as possible to identify, try as much as possible to identify intelligent wife and marry. So it is very, very important. So that is why intelligence is usually coming from the mother. And then in addition to this, we are also going to look at the next component of the cell membrane, which is, the next component of the cell. Of course, we said nuclear membrane. So a nuclear membrane is what cover the cell. So it cover the nucleus. It surrounds the nucleus. So it's like a layer. Look at it. It's like a layer that cover the nucleus. And it's also made up of two layers. And also in this membrane, this nuclear membrane is also what controls the material of getting in or leaving the cells. Of course, during the during what you call central dogma of molecular biology or gene expression, the DNA is in the nucleus, and of course, the DNA is usually converted into RNA in the nucleus. Is converted into RNA into the nucleus. And of course, the RNA is what we use in synthesizing proteins. It's what we use to synthesize protein. So, but protein synthesis is taking place in the ribosomes, while the RNA are synthesized, are synthesized in the are synthesized in the nucleus. So it must actually leave the nucleus and then to the cytoplasm where the ribosome is located. So the movement of the RNA from the nucleus to the cytoplasm is controlled by the nuclear membrane. And of course, not only the RNA, there are so many molecules that are transported from the nucleus to the cytoplasm and from the cytoplasm to the nucleus. So all this controlling system is controlled by the cytoplasm. Sorry, is controlled by the nuclear membrane. So nuclear membrane is what does that. It control. Okay, maybe some bacteria are trying to get into the cell, which is also they are trying to get into the nucleus, and if they get there, they will cause a problem. And of course, the nuclear membrane will now disallow it, will not allow it to get there. So that is the functions of the nuclear membrane. It controls that. So like the membrane is an opening that allow the material to enter and leave the nucleus. So it would give the instruction that this material please leave this, move out from the nucleus, please go to the cytoplasm. You are needed there. And then of course from the cytoplasm, okay, maybe there are some proteins or some biomolecules and they want to get into the nucleus. And then the instructions will also be sent to this nuclear membrane that okay, the nucleus is in need of this, and this from the cytoplasm. And then the nuclear membrane will now allow it to get into the nucleus for the proper functioning of the body. So then the next thing after the nuclear membrane is the chromosomes. So what is the chromosomes? So chromosomes is found in the nucleus and it's made up of the DNA. So the chromosomes are made up of three major components. So chromosomes are made up of three major components. And these chromosomes, number one, we have DNA. RNA is also found there. And there are proteins. So in the chromosomes, there are DNA, RNA, as well as proteins. But the proteins that are found in the chromosomes, we have histone protein and non-histone protein. Histone protein and non-histone protein. So what is histone protein? Histone protein is a protein that coil the DNA. DNA generally is a very thin and a very thin material, but very long, very long. Even 100 times the cell itself. 100 times the cells itself. But now the question is, how does it pack and package and then fits into the nucleus, not even the cell itself. So DNA is very long, but very thin, very, very thin. So how is that DNA get into the nucleus? So it's because of this histone protein. So this histone protein is what coil and wrapped and packed the DNA into very smaller and minute something, very smaller and minus, very smaller, and it package it, and that is how it fits into the nucleus. So the DNA is wrapped, packaged, coiled, and supercoiled, packed, supercoiled, and then fit into the nucleus. But if you are actually going to take the DNA of the cells, just a DNA from from a particular cell, if you can actually stretch it end to end, it will reach out to 6 feet. 6 feet. But because of these chromosomes, in the chromosomes there is a histone. And that histone is what package, coil, and supercoil the DNA into very smaller, and then fits into the nucleus. Yes, the protein is histone protein. So it's the histone protein that package, coil, and supercoil it, coil it, it supercoil it, package it, and supercoil it, and then fit it into the nucleus. And of course, these chromosomes is what contains the instruction for trait and characteristics. So as I said, in the chromosomes, we have histone protein and non-histone protein. There are histone proteins and then there are non-histone protein. So the histone protein is what wrapped, coil, and supercoil the DNA. And then at the same time, the chromosomes is contain instructions for traits and characteristics. If you are beautiful, is because of the DNA, as I mentioned earlier. Because this DNA that we are talking about, it contains genes, and each genes, each genes is responsible. Each gene is responsible for producing a particular protein. So whenever there is a protein, then there is a trait. What controls the skin color is melanin. It means that the higher the concentration, the higher the amount of, the higher the concentration of the melanin you have, the more black or the blacker you will be. So it means that the lower the concentration, the fairer the skin, and the higher the concentration of the melanin, then the more black color you will have. So there is a gene in the DNA. Like in a human, we as a human being, we have 25,000 genes. And each of these genes is responsible for producing a particular proteins. And whenever there is a protein, then there is a function. And the function translates to traits. Like red blood cell is responsible for transport of oxygen from one part of the body to another. And what makes red blood cells to have that traits, to have that character, is because of the hemoglobin, which is a protein. And the protein hemoglobin is actually a function, or is an instruction from the gene that is located in the DNA. Adrenaline, it's a fear and anxiety hormones, and they are the genes for the adrenaline in the DNA. So that is why, because in the DNA, in the DNA, in the DNA, there are these traits. Some people, in terms of, like, let's say sexual characteristics, some people are very sexually active, and the reason is because the concentration of the testosterone and the progenes and the progesterone in their DNA, there are those genes that are producing a lot of a large quantity or a high concentration of those genes that are related to testosterone and the progesterone. And that is the reason why such people, they are sexually very active. Men and women have both the testosterone and progesterone as well as estrogen. But the concentration of the testosterone in men is higher than the concentration of the estrogen, and that is why you are man. And you are woman because the concentration of progesterone and estrogen in your body is higher than the concentration of the testosterone. And of course, if the concentrations of both these two hormones are the same, then you will have bisexual humans. And all these instructions are there contained in the DNA. So the chromosomes is what package the DNA. So first we have a cell. Inside the cell we have a nucleus, and inside the nucleus we have a chromosome. And inside a chromosomes we have the histone and non-histone protein. So the histone protein is what tightly packed the DNA and wrap it, coil it and supercoil it, and then fit it into the nucleus. So that is chromosome. And then the next thing is the nucleolus. The next one is nucleolus. So what is nucleolus? A nucleolus is found inside the nucleus, and it contains RNA to build proteins. This is very interesting. In the nucleus, there is a DNA, and then in the nucleolus, there is an RNA. And these nucleolus are found inside the nucleus. And of course, remember I told you, when you have the DNA is what actually produces RNA. And then the RNA will move to the nucleolus. And then this RNA will now change to protein. So the process whereby the RNA is converted into proteins are called translation. So when RNA is changed into proteins, the process is called translation. And someone is asking what the non-histone proteins are doing. Actually, most of those non-histone proteins, they are enzymes, and enzymes are proteins. And what they are doing is actually combat, like for example, now that we are saying RNA is changing into proteins. So those proteins that are converting RNA to proteins are example of the non-histone proteins. So that is the nucleolus. It's found inside the nucleus, and it contains RNA that build proteins. And then the next thing is cytoplasm. So what is cytoplasm? Cytoplasm is gel-like mixture, and it's surrounded by cell membrane, and it contains hereditary material. It's not only hereditary material, because the cytoplasm is taken, or it's like a gel, it's a fluid-like structure that all the organelles of the cells are suspended. So all the organelles of the cells are suspended in the cytoplasm, like mitochondria, Golgi body, they are all suspended in the cytoplasm. And then the next thing is the endoplasmic reticulum. The main function of endoplasmic reticulum is the transport of material around the cells. It transports materials from the cells. Like for example, the endoplasmic reticulum, it can take one, maybe as protein is synthesized in the cytoplasm. The protein is synthesized in the ribosomes, which is located in the cytoplasm. And then once the proteins are synthesized, it can take it to endoplasmic reticulum for packaging. So the transport of substances from one part of the cell to another part of the cell is done by endoplasmic reticulum. Like for example, ribosomes synthesize protein, and then Golgi properties modify and package the proteins. So once the proteins are synthesized in the cytoplasm, then it will be taken and transported to the Golgi body for the packaging. So what does that work is the endoplasmic reticulum of the cell. Is the endoplasmic reticulum of the cell. And this endoplasmic reticulum are classified into two. We have smooth endoplasmic reticulum and we have rough endoplasmic reticulum. And the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, the basic difference between them, it lacks ribosomes. It means that it doesn't have ribosomes. While the rough type, of course, is the picture here. It means that it has a ribosomes embedded in surface. So it has ribosomes. It has ribosomes. And this smooth and the rough endoplasmic reticulum, they all have their functions and we'll look at them. So the next thing is the ribosomes. What is the main functions of the ribosome? So in each cell, there are thousands of these ribosomes. And the main functions of the ribosomes is protein synthesis. So it's the one that synthesizes protein, like the hemoglobin that we are talking about, adrenaline, and any other proteins that you know that we generate or we synthesize in our body. It is actually done by the ribosomes. And this ribosome found on ribosomes and floating throughout the cell. So it is floating throughout the cell. Floating. Yeah. So now the next thing that we are going to look at, as I said, don't forget that the ribosome is synthesizing proteins. That's the main function. That's the main important things that you should know here. And then the next thing is mitochondria. So what is the major functions of mitochondria? So mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. So the mitochondria is what produce energy throughout chemical reaction by breaking down fats, carbohydrate, and protein so they generate energy. So the major site and the area where energy are synthesized in a cell is mitochondria. So mitochondria is synthesizing proteins. So a lot of proteins are synthesized in the mitochondria. And how is how is this energy are produced or how this energy are generated in the mitochondria? Is through aerobic respiration. What is aerobic respiration? That is the breaking down of food products in the presence of oxygen to generate energy. So this process of respiration is taking place in the mitochondria. And this mitochondria controls the level of water and other materials in cells. So apart from the energy, then it also controls the amount of water and other materials in a cell. Like generally in most of our cells, we're supposed to have, in most of our cells, we're supposed to have a percentage of water around 70%. We need to have the percentage of water to be around 70%. So if the level is lower than that or is higher than that, so the mitochondria is what will control that. And it recycles and decomposes proteins, fat, and carbohydrates. All this is mitochondria. And then the next thing is Golgi body. So the Golgi bodies is actually involved in protein packaging. So like for example, remember the proteins are synthesized in the ribosomes. But the packaging of the proteins is taking place in the Golgi bodies. So the Golgi bodies is what actually controlling the packaging of the cell. But the translational modification, when the proteins are synthesized, so the translational modification of the proteins is usually taking place in the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. And also at the same time, the endoplasmic reticulum is what actually control, like for example, I have to come back and say something here under the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. We know that generally when we take drugs, We take drugs when if we are not feeling fine. We generally take drugs. We generally take drugs. So now, if you take drugs, ladies and gentlemen, where do we metabolize drugs? Where do we metabolize drugs? If we now take drugs, where the drugs are processed in our body. So the drugs are generally processed in the liver, but specifically where in the liver? In the cells of the liver. In the cells of the liver, which is hepatocytes. But in the cells of the liver, where specifically in the cell? It is actually in the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. So the smooth endoplasmic reticulum is where also drug metabolisms are taking place. We have so many enzymes that are like cytochrome P450 and some other conjugating enzymes that are all there in the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. And of course, this smooth endoplasmic reticulum is what control the metabolism of the drugs, and the post-translation modification is also taking place there. So after proteins are synthesized, they will undergo post-translation modification, and then the Golgi body will now package it. It's like a company. It's like a company. The protein manufacturing industry of a cell is ribosomes. And then the modification of the product, that is the proteins after it's being synthesized, it has to be modified. So that modification is generally taking place in the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. And then after the modification, then it needs to be packaged. So the packaging is taking place in the Golgi body. It's taking place in the Golgi body. So, and then also move materials within the cells. That is another function, is also move the materials. So it move materials outside of the cells at the same time. That is the functions of the Golgi body. And then the next thing is the lysosome. So lysosome is a digestive plant, or is a digestive part of it's a digestive plant. It's a digestive plant. When you say plant, it means it's not normal plant that you know. It's like a pipeline, or it's a digestive. A it's like a region where digestion is usually taking place. But the digestion here is not only for proteins, fat, and carbohydrate. It's also digest so many substances. Like for example, in this lysosome, we have an enzyme called lysozyme. So whenever there are some microorganisms that are harmful to the body, that can cause problem, they can cause problem in the body. This lysosome contain enzymes called lysozyme. So the lysozyme will identify those proteins and then break them. It will break them and then eliminate them. And it also transport undigested material to cell membrane for the removal. So it also do that. When there are undigested material, like for example, sometimes we take food, when we take food, there are some product or particles of the food that cannot be digested. So if you have such, what happen? Then the lysosomes will now transport them to the membrane, and then the membrane will now take them out of the cell. So the cells it break down if lysosome is explodes. So it means that if the cell is having, if the lysosome is having problem, then the entire cells will have problem. It's not only actually lysosomes, because the nucleus is very important, because it's what directs the activity of the cells. Assuming now you have a cell and you remove the nucleus of the cells, what do you expect from the cell? Of course, the cell will destroy. Like here we have Mohammed Jamila, and we have Dokas Odunlade. Assuming now if you now take the Excel from Dokas, and you take that of the Excel from Jamila, and you remove the nucleus from the Jamila Excel and you implant it into a Dokas cells, what will happen? And then the egg now is now fertilized by the sperm. What will happen? The answer is because the genetic content of the DNA or the genetic material is that of the Jamila. Therefore, the inherit or the hereditary character will come from directly from that Jamila. That is what will happen because the Docus is just having her own other content like mitochondria, but the main hereditary material, which is the DNA, is in the nucleus and is the nucleus of the DNA and is the nucleus of the Jamila Muhammad that you now take it to that of the Docus. So it means that if now the Docus egg is being fertilized by the sperm, it means that the baby will get a character from the Jamila, not from the Docus. So you should understand that. So that is why sometimes you need to actually reason very well. It's like a motor, it's like a car. You have a car and you remove the engine of Toyota Corolla and you now place it into let's say Peugeot 206. What do you expect the speed of the car? It will be similar to that of the Toyota, provided that all other conditions remain constant. So that is why you should understand that when we are talking about the activities of a cell, it is generally controlled by each and every part of that cell. Because if anyone is having problem, then the entire cells will have problem. So you should understand that. So that is lysosome. So the main function of lysosome, the main function that you should never forget, the main functions of the lysosome, it contains lysozyme. And whenever there is any foreign organisms, like let's say Salmonella typhi gets into your cell and it want to cause typhoid, then the lysosome will now release an enzyme called lysozymes. And then the lysozymes will now kill the Salmonella typhi, that is the bacteria, and it will now kill it and eliminate it. So that is the major functions of the lysosome. So actually you're aware that okay, red blood cells, the main function of the red blood cells is actually to involve in the immunity of the human body. Yeah, so we have so many of them, but in many cases, these lysozymes, they are the one, this lysosomes is the one that do the job in all those different types of cells that you know. So the next thing is vacuoles. So what is vacuoles? Vacuoles is membrane-bound sacs for storage, digestion, and waste removal. So it's actually used for the storage of food and also the digestion of food, as well as the removal of waste products. So you should understand that there is a digestion. When we eat food, we digest food. So vacuole is also health important. It's also important in digesting foods, and also important in storage of foods. When your cell get extra nutrient, then the vacuole will now store it. And when there is a waste in a cell, then the vacuole will remove the waste. And it will also contain water, and it will also help plant cells to maintain their shape. So, and then the next one is a chloroplast. A chloroplast usually is found in the plant cell and it contains green chlorophyll. So, of course, this chloroplast is where photosynthesis takes place. Although specifically, it's not the chloroplast that do the work. It's not the chlorophyll that did the work. In a cell, we have what you call thylakoid membrane. We have what you call thylakoid membrane. And this thylakoid membrane is what actually convert the solar energy into chemical energy. So thylakoid membrane is embedded in the chlorophyll. So in a cell, you have chloroplast. In a chloroplast, you have chlorophyll. In a chlorophyll, then we have the thylakoid membrane. And the thylakoid membrane is what converts the solar energy into chemical energy. So it converts solar energy into foods. That is photosynthesis. The glucose that you are seeing in photosynthesis. The glucose you are seeing in photosynthesis. So it's the thylakoid membrane that generates it. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think that is all, and that is all for today's lecture. So, this is the first part of the cell structure and function. This is the first part. So, in the next class, we are going to look at the membrane and the transport across the cell membrane. So, if you have any question, you can ask. Is there any question? So it means that if there is no question, then we are going to end the lecture now, and then we meet later. Thank you very much for attending the lecture.